So Knight just got a really big buff, and I feel like this is a good time to make this video where I show you guys how to manipulate the guard's AI, because the guard's AI are actually very, very manipulable. You can kind of make them do really stupid stuff and take advantage of them. I mean, you can kind of just clown all around them, to be honest with you. If the Knight himself is not actually directly on top of you, chasing you with the guard, you can literally just have a full-on circus with them in terms of making them do whatever the hell you want. But even if the Knight is chasing you as well, these are still really good tricks that you can use to your advantage to try to throw the Knight off and try to make the guard's path in a way that maybe is less than ideal. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to break this down into 3 important different sections, with an additional 4th one that's going to be a little bit more niche, but 3 main sections in terms of ways to manipulate the AI. But first, let me quickly cover why this is even important. Okay, so from the Knight player's perspective, what they see is they will see their guard chasing you, and they will see the aura of their guard, and essentially, especially if you're breaking line of sight, they're not going to really know exactly where you are or where you're going. They're going to watch where their guard is going, and they're going to assume that the guard has whatever side that they are watching covered, and they will probably try to pincer attack you by going the other way. This is why the guard manipulation is so important, because you can basically bait the Knight into thinking that you pathed in a way that you didn't, and essentially you can use the misdirection to get a ton of distance and make it way across the map and get away from what is usually guaranteed damage. So without further ado, let's just hop into the first section, which is literally just the simple act of throwing pallets while the guard is chasing you. So essentially the way this works is that when you throw a pallet while the guard is chasing you, the guard will immediately redirect his path to the other side of that pallet in the shortest distance he can get there possible. What this means is that you can kind of control which side the guard goes around depending on when you throw the pallet. For example, here are 2 clips of me throwing the same pallet with the same route running against guards, where I throw one later and one earlier, and in both situations the guards go different directions based on actually where they're positioned when I throw the pallet. One quick note before I move on from this section, since this is kind of the more basic one, is that you do have to be careful with how close the guard is. If the guard is close enough that it looks like the pallet would normally stun them, then the guard will actually go through the pallet and damage you instead, so make sure you have some distance. Okay, technique number 2 is basically fake vaulting pallets and windows. So there's something weird about the AI, and this is interesting because I think this used to be a bug, but then it got codified, and now it's actually a part of the intended game design mechanic. The devs actually added an animation to this now. But essentially the way it works is that if you run up and then touch a window or a thrown pallet, the guard will have to then go touch that window or pallet themselves before they actually chase after you again. You do have to be careful though, because if they come in contact with you at any point, they will still do damage immediately. So you have to like fake it and then make sure you stay out of their path to make sure they don't actually just very quickly hit you. But as long as you stay out of their path, they won't actually damage you until they go to the fake that you did. On top of that, if you have a lot of distance, you could actually queue up multiple of these. Like, if you can queue up as many as you want, and they won't actually go after you again until all the queued up actions are done on their part. This is probably the easiest to execute and maybe one of the more useful ones out of all the advice that I'm giving you during this whole video, so definitely take time to practice this one if you get the chance. The main thing that makes this a bit hard though is that generally speaking, these are much easier to do when you have a lot of distance on the guards, but luckily for you, this third trick, which I think is the most impressive out of all of them, is something that I discovered recently that will give you a ton of distance on the guards. Quick shout out to Zombie Joker, because their comment on a video I uploaded recently about the buffs tonight is actually what made me investigate this. I think this is what Zombie Joker is actually talking about in this comment, but I just kind of investigated to figure out exactly the ins and outs of how it works. So let me break it all down for you. Okay, normally when you vault a window or a pallet or anything, if you just run at a window and vault it, the guard will follow you through the window and just follow your path exactly. However, if you touch the wall right beside the window, as long as it's a flat wall beside the window, relatively flat, as long as you touch the wall beside the window, even just a single time before vaulting, the guard actually won't follow you through the window, and instead they will go around and try to get to the other side. This is really bizarre, but it's extremely useful. Kind of like throwing pallets, this works the same way, where they will try to take whatever the shortest path is to the other side of the window. But essentially what it is it queues up an action, again, kind of like faking vaults and windows. It queues up an action for the guard where they have to get to the other side of the window and touch it before they'll do anything else. You can quite literally vault into them once they change their pathing and turn around, and they will completely leave you alone until they get to the other side and actually touch the window. It's very important to know that this does not work with pallets for some reason. I don't know why. Pallets just must be coded differently. It's only with windows, and there only has to be a little section of wall that's flat against the window, or else it won't work. So there are some windows in certain situations where you can't actually abuse this, but I would argue that like probably 90% of the windows that exist in this game are set up in a way where you can totally abuse this. Now, I know I said before that the palette and window fake is like the easiest and one of the more useful ones to pull off, but this one is by miles the most effective thing to do to really get the bots off your tail in a big way. Not only does this create weird misdirection situations for the killer in terms of their line of sight, but it also makes it so that you get a ton of distance on the guard, which allows you to then do even more things that you can queue up to try to make him even more confused. You can tie this in with fake vaults and all kinds of different things to make the guards do all kinds of wacky stuff. And again, as a night player, if you're not right on top of the chase, it's very hard to tell where the survivor actually is going. And if you are right on top of the chase, then the guard is going to deplete the chase 3 times faster thanks to the new update. So it kind of puts you in a pretty good situation as survivor, much better than you would be in otherwise. So again, remember with this, it's really important to keep in mind that all you have to do is make sure you touch the wall, a flat wall beside the window before vaulting, and then immediately vault after. You just have to make sure that you don't run at the window from like a perpendicular angle, and then you should be fine. And again, keep in mind that once the killer actually gets to the window and touches it, that's when he'll kind of change his mind and turn around. And his path will be dependent on where you are and also his position. He will try to take whatever the shortest path to you is. So keep that in mind as well, because you can kind of decide which direction he goes even after the fact. Okay, and finally, the fourth and final. This one's probably the least efficient and honestly the hardest to pull off, so I almost didn't include it in the video at all. But essentially, the guards work really funkily around when you break line of sight. I don't really know how to explain this, but essentially, if you have a ton of distance on the guards, and then you turn a corner that breaks line of sight, kind of like the window fakes and everything, they won't do anything else with their pathing until they go to the spot that they last saw you before you broke line of sight. This one's really hard to pull off because you essentially need to have a lot of distance, and you also need to make the guard go wide, if that makes sense. Because again, you got to remember that if you go into their path at any point, like if you cross their path, they will damage you. Although this really is really important when you're trying to turn like a big corner like this. I have actually kind of been testing this even further, and it actually appears as though this works with any even minor line of sight blocker. For instance, even a thin tree you can run behind, and the guard will have to run and touch that tree before he chases you again. Sometimes even like medium-high objects that aren't super tall will even work as well. Basically anything that breaks line of sight. So again, I'd be a little bit careful if it's a very low object, but this works on most things. And essentially you could just use these line of sight breakers to, again, force the guard to wherever you want. You do lose a little bit of distance every time you do this one though. Like you're not really gaining distance when you do this. You're kind of losing it. But again, it's really, really good for a very, very fast misdirection. Because again, a lot of the times against Knight, that's kind of what you need to do is just hit him with a really, really good misdirection. And honestly, that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty much the end of the video. I think that covers basically all the techniques that I've found. It is important to keep in mind, I know I've said this before, but it's important to keep in mind that in the heat of the moment, you're going to have a knight that's also following you. So you do have to be a bit aware of where the knight's positioning is as well, and it's not easy to do. This does take a lot of practice. So if you're not like necessarily taking the knight on long chases right away with this, don't get frustrated. It takes some time to get good at because you have to keep in mind the position of the guard and the knight. But I do promise you that if you practice this, you will definitely catch so many knight players off guard, and you will be able to take them on such crazy chases. It's honestly so fun. So practice up. Try to utilize what you learned here. Maybe if you're a knight player, you can maybe use this to try to learn how to play against better survivors too. But regardless, thank you guys so much for watching. I will be uploading more educational and informational videos soon. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to like the video and subscribe if you guys enjoyed it as well. And that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I'm out of here. Until next time, I'll see ya. I'll take care. See ya. See you later. See ya.